And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the King Jordan Radio Show for Thursday night, December 10th, 2015. This is King Jordan you're listening to. Tonight on the show, we'll discuss the Freddie Gray trial. We'll discuss the Oscar Pistorius trial that has been, the verdict has been switched in South Africa. We'll talk about the man who pushed his wife, who just got a sentence for life. He pushed his wife over a cliff, and now she's gone, and the judge just gave her life. A 6-year-old boy killed in his sleep, terrible tragedy. We'll talk about that. The Dalia Dippolito there's going to be a retrial in that case, that infamous case in Florida where she allegedly set up her husband, is going to get another crack at it due to something with the jury. And our pal who's been on the show, Mark Arglash, is a part of the defense team on that show. Tonight we have an all-star panel joining us. Tonight, first, let's bring in, out of New York, based out of Long Island. He is a New York defense attorney, seen on all the major networks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the show, Mr. BoB Schalk. Good evening, Bob. How are you?
Good, King Jordan. How are you? Thanks for having me on the program, my friend.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Also, we have another defense attorney based out of the Bronx, Mr. Alex Sanchez. Good evening, Alex. How are you?
All right, King Jordan, how's it going? I'm really happy to be here. Hey, listen, I want to make a suggestion. I know you play that hip music in the beginning of the show, but I'd like you to play the theme to Perry Mason or Peter Gunn or The Twilight Zone or even The Outer Limits. You know, to set the appropriate atmosphere for the show.
Absolutely. Next time you're on, I'll get that on there for you. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have a forensic expert. His name is Joseph Scott Morgan, and he joins us tonight. Good evening, Joseph. How are you?
Hey, Jordan, how are you? Hello to all my friends, and hello to all of your fans out there. So good to be with you as always.
Absolutely, and let's talk about the Freddie Gray case. As the officer took the stand, here's some sound, and we'll talk about this case on the other side of this audio.
The trial of Officer William Porter. He takes the stand testifying about what happened to Freddie Gray. Porter is charged with manslaughter, assault, and misconduct in office. He is the first of 6 officers to stand trial. WJZ investigator Mike Halgren live outside the courthouse downtown with what Porter is telling jurors. Mike?
Officer Porter appears calm and composed as his lawyer leads him in questioning that started with why he became an officer, and then he's walking him through stop by stop. And here are some of the highlights we've heard so far from that testimony: that Gray never told Porter that he could not breathe. Also, Officer Porter said he heard Gray yelling and rocking the van. He said that arrestees are not seatbelted in the vans, but he always seatbelts them in his personal vehicle. And Porter considers himself a fair officer who has built up a rapport with the people in West Baltimore. After 5 days and more than a dozen prosecution witnesses, Officer William Porter's defense team finally started presenting its case against charges of misconduct, manslaughter, second-degree assault, and reckless endangerment. The defense will produce its own expert witnesses on policing and on Freddie Gray's injuries. They claim Officer Porter acted reasonably after Gray asked him for a medic and said he couldn't breathe while on the floor of a police wagon. But prosecutors say Porter decided not to call for help because he didn't care about Gray's life. The defense says Officer Porter is a good officer with good character, and the van driver, Officer Caesar Goodson, who's next to go on trial, had the main responsibility to call for a medic. The defense case is expected to be quicker than the prosecution's, with the star witness being Officer Porter himself. law professor Doug Colbert.
After he gave that full statement to the interrogating officers, it's understandable why the defense is going to call him as a witness. He has a lot of explaining to do, and he also wants to leave the jury with the best impression of himself.
And Officer Porter is trying to do that right now, but he still will face some tough cross-examination. He is the second witness the defense has called. The first witness is Dr. Vincent DeMaio, a forensic pathologist who has testified in some huge cases, including the George Zimmerman case. He testified that he believes this is not a homicide, but an accident based on Gray's injuries. Reporting live at Courthouse East, Mike Halgren, WJZ Eyewitness News.
Mike, thank you. And here's what you need to know during the second week of the trial for Officer William Porter. Today, the defense started presenting its case. Porter himself taking the stand, testifying that Gray never told him he could not breathe. Pathologist Dr. Vincent DeMaio also testified, saying Gray's death was an accident. Character witnesses are expected to be called to speak positively about Officer Porter's moral compass. Stay with WJZ for complete coverage of Officer Porter's trial. We will continue to bring you the latest from the courthouse as the defense calls more witnesses to the stand.
All right, Bob, we usually don't see defendants take the stand to their own defense. What did you think about this move, having this officer take the stand?
Well, you're right. Normally defendants and their attorneys elect not to take the witness stand, but in this case, he's not your normal defendant. He's a decorated police officer. He's been on the force a lot of years. He's testified for sure, no doubt. He knows how to act on the witness stand. He knows how to answer questions, and he's got nothing to hide. He has no criminal background, no history of things of those nature to be attacked on cross-examination. He already gave a statement to the investigators, and if he's just rehashing his original statement and clearing up any errors, he's proving to the jury that he's not afraid to answer the tough questions, and he's probably answering the questions that they as jurors would have to fill in any gaps so there's no issues with regards to their deliberations. So if I was his lawyer, I would have done the same exact thing. I would have put him on the witness stand. I would have, gotten up there and brought out, his version of the events that day. And again, to me, the facts and circumstances of this case for this particular officer, I find it very difficult, the burden of proof on the district attorneys and the state prosecutors to prove this case against this particular officer. It does not seem as if he had any working knowledge of this individual's, need for medical attention till the very end, and they called for help, and he waited with them until the ambulance came. And you also have the benefit of two forensic pathologists, one for the state and one for the defense. Defense attorneys call it, the experts cancel each other out. You have one expert, highly decorated, saying it happened one way. You have one saying it happened the other way. So, I think this case is going in well for them, obviously, from what I'm seeing and what I've read. So I agree with the manner in which it's being handled from the defense side.
Alex Sanchez, criminal defense attorney out of New York. What do you say?
The turning point in this case for this particular officer, and really all the officers, is when a judge made a ruling that all the defendants would be tried independently. That was a tremendous, tremendous victory for the defense. Why is it a victory for the defense? Because now this officer, and it's already being done, they're pointing fingers at the other officers. They're saying, well, that really wasn't my responsibility. It was the driver's responsibility. Or it was the other officer's responsibility. It's all about deflecting blame onto the shoulders of someone else that is not even there on trial and is not going to be called as a witness in the case. And so once a judge made that ruling, and I'm not saying it was an improper ruling, but once the judge made that ruling, they gave a great gift to the defense in this case. I think this case, from everything I've heard, I'm not so certain that the police officer in this case is going to walk. I think that the jury's going to have a problem knowing that this officer was one of several officers that participated in the arrest of this individual, participated in securing him and putting him in a van and taking him to a police station, and the guy ended up dead. So who's responsible? And, of course, the old finger-pointing routine is going to be played out here, but ultimately I think the jury is going to start asking, wait a minute, this guy's dead. You know, he had some role in this thing. Maybe he won't be found guilty of the highest charge, but he'll probably be found guilty of one of the lesser charges. But I predict he will be found guilty of something.
Interesting. Joseph Scott, so say you.
Yeah, from the very beginning, I've been underwhelmed by the forensic evidence here. And I don't, there's nothing that is glaring in this case. DeMaio framed it in his testimony that accidents happen. And keep in mind, we in the medical legal community don't necessarily, we're not there to seek justice, as people like to get on TV and whatnot and beat their chests over. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in scientific fact here. And there is not, from an evidentiary standpoint, from a physical evidence standpoint, there's not a compelling case here. I think that my esteemed colleague was correct relative to the canceling out of both of these forensic pathologists. When you look at the injuries that were sustained, it's not like they took Freddie Gray out and beat him down. He doesn't have these wild, outlandish insults all over his body. He hasn't been improperly necessarily restrained. Now, was he negligently secured? Potentially. But one of the difficult things they're going to have to defeat in this, in my opinion at least, is that there seems to be a thread that runs through standard operating procedure with Baltimore PD regarding the use of a paddy wagon. It seems as though that many people, most of the people, do not get belted inside this cabin. And when we talked about this case on HLN, several months ago, one of the bones of contention here was the fact that this space that they're putting these people in is so very tight and restrictive that the officers can't really get into this thing. This is already ground that's already been gone over. In the past, the paddy wagons were kind of a big open box that had padded sides and padded floors. That's not the case with this. You've got these real confined areas with, there's been the aforementioned bolt that Gray was said to have banged his head on. He was thrashing about in the van. Witnesses even saw the van rocking to and fro. So I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a forensic scientist, and I got to tell you, there's nothing here that's really kind of blowing my hair back with this case.
And Bob, in regards to the state's case over in Chicago, it looks like they have a much stronger case in regards to that case with the police officer and
I don't think you're going to find anyone, lawyer, defense attorney, prosecutor, forensics pathologist, or cop that's ever going to tell you that what happened in Chicago was anything but a homicide. That was just an overzealous police officer shooting an unarmed man who, yes, had a knife in his hand, but was not making an overt act towards anybody in a manner that, that's why tasers were invented. That was just egregious behavior. So that case and the Freddie Gray case are on the polar opposite ends of the criminal justice spectrum. I mean, without question. I mean, without saying, we've all been alluding to it in the sense that, the defense is almost, whether they're going to say it or not, that, obviously, Freddie Gray killed himself. That's what they're alluding to, that he got into this, there's videotape of him getting into the van, and I've, covered this story for numerous news programs, and if you look at the video of him being placed in the van, he was doing, his body was going limp and they were dragging his legs, but as he got to the base of the truck, you see him take both of his legs, push off of them, and get into the van. So his spine was not severed when he got into that van, and no one is saying otherwise. So it happened inside the van, and if they're seeing it bounce to and fro, back and forth as the truck is going down, that has nothing to do with the driver. It has to be doing with the occupants. So, again, at what point in time is the jury going to be able to differentiate between what evidence there is of Freddie Gray potentially injuring himself versus any officer stopping suddenly, which would have caused him to sever his spine? There's just no smoking gun, which indicates that was the case